You know, we started a series a couple of weeks ago about discipleship living. How do I live as a disciple? We talked, first of all, about the power to live as a disciple of Jesus Christ, where that power comes from. We noted that it was by keeping our eyes focused on Jesus Christ, as 2 Corinthians 3 in verse 18 indicates, when the Apostle Paul said, and we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being changed into his likeness from one degree of glory to another. The more we keep our eyes focused on Jesus Christ, the more we become like him, the more we'll be plugged into the power to be like him. Inch by inch, it's a cinch. Don't expect it to happen overnight. Keep on, keeping your eyes focused on Jesus Christ. But as you're living for Jesus and trying to live that discipleship life, what happens while you're on that journey? And things don't always go as planned. I don't always do as good as I'd like to do. And while I stumble and fumble and sometimes crumble in my attempt to be a disciple of Jesus Christ and to become like him, how do I live with myself? How do I live with my mistakes? How do I live with my failures that no doubt will come? And how do you face the Lord every day and pray to him every day after you have failed him again and again and again and again, sometimes in the very same areas you failed in before? The only way I know to do that successfully and not lose your mind is to have some kind of assurance, some kind of failure assurance. You know, we all buy insurance policies, right? You buy an insurance policy not because you want to use it, because you hope you never have to use it. You want to be insured. You want to be assured that your car is going to get repaired if it's in a collision or get replaced, or your house is going to be rebuilt if it burns down or a tornado gets it. We live in the age of wanting assurances, and we need failure assurance also in our life with Jesus Christ. So where do I get that? How do I find that? How do I find the assurance to know that no matter how many times I fail, that I am still okay with Jesus Christ? Well, first of all, I want to tell you where not to get it. There are some ineffective ways that we sometimes try to feel better about our failures in the face of Jesus Christ. Maybe you've involved yourselves in one of these attempts. Maybe you've done all four of these in your attempt to try to feel better about your relationship with Jesus Christ. There's one group of people I call the pain bearers. You know, you failed Jesus Christ, but you know what? You've got to grit your teeth and bear it in your religion. You just got to keep pushing forward. Keep on keeping on. There's good news, but it's mostly bad news. And the bad news is you're going to go to hell if you don't keep gritting your teeth. You have to keep bearing the pain. And you never know for sure if you're okay. So look, Rick, just buck it up, buddy. We just got to keep going, right? And that's not very effective when you've really messed up. But we have the pain bearers. Another group of us I call the pretenders. I mean, we put up a front so everybody thinks we're going to be spiritually okay and we're spiritually confident, but deep down inside, we're really insecure. And we're the only ones that know it, but we're there and we're insecure and we're just pretending everything's okay. And then there's a group I call the prayers. And I've been a prayer more times than I care to admit. But here's what a prayer does. After every failure, whatever the failure was in the face of your spiritual life, you spend agonizing hours, heart-wrenching hours, gut-wrenching prayer time with God, hoping God will forgive you, and you beg him, and you do it over and over, and you think, you know, the more I pray, the better my chances of forgiveness, so I'm just going to keep on doing that. Maybe God will forgive me. And then there's the group I call penance workers. I've done this a couple times too. Penance workers. If I fail this week, guess what? Next week I am working twice as hard because I'm going to prove to God that he wants me around and that he's going to have to forgive me. I'm going to work my way into God's favor. Problem with that is it can't be done. And there have been days in my life when I have been all four of those kinds of people trying to deal with my discipleship insecurities. None of those are effective. And so what I want to know is, where can I find real assurance? Where can I find real confidence? And you need to know today that real assurance, real confidence comes not from feelings, it comes from faith. And we as a believer, we as a disciple of Jesus have to quit relying on our feelings, because feelings are not very reliable. You can't count on them because they change with the wind. Faith, on the other hand, is based on evidence. Guess where the evidence is for the faith necessary for failure assurance to be found? You want to guess where that is in the Bible? It's in the Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Just like the power for discipleship living is found by focusing on Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, assurance in the face of failure is also found in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Discipleship living powers in the Gospels, discipleship living tangibility we talked about last week is found there, and so is assurance. Since Jesus Christ is the same today, yesterday, and forever, we can be assured of the fact that the way he dealt with the early disciples is the way he still deals with you and me today. How he interacted with them, he interacts with us. How he loved them, he loves us. How he accepted them, he accepts us. And they were just like you and me. They failed more than once, sometimes with the same thing, over and over again. And yet he always assured them that their relationship with him was okay. When Jesus first called Peter to follow him, he told him these words. He said, "Do not be afraid. From now on you will catch men." Luke 5, verse 10. Jesus became on that day his from now on friend. He wants to do the same for you. If you don't feel like Jesus is your from now on friend, I hope you will before you leave today. And I want you to consider with me 3 failure events in the life of the Apostle Peter where Jesus gave him failure assurance. And I want you to see that's where we'll get our assurance as well. The first one is found in Matthew chapter 14, if you want to go ahead and turn that direction. I call this particular event in the life of Peter floundering faith. To flounder is to struggle or stagger helplessly or clumsily in water. That's where we got it. We got it from the fish flounder. I don't know if you've ever been floundering before. You ever been fishing for flounder? Anybody ever do that? You can actually just use a spear to catch flounder because, I don't know if you know about this about a flounder, but they lie flat on the sea floor, and both their eyes are on the same side of their head. So it's kind of weird looking, right? And so what happens a lot of times is they'll be laying in the shallows, and the water will recede, and if you go out there, they can't get away from you. They may try, but they just flop around. They just flounder. They can't move. They can't get out of the way. And you got your little gig or your spear, boom, you got you a fish. Easy peasy. That's what we're talking about when we talk about floundering faith. Sometimes our faith feels just like that. And that's what happens here with Peter in Matthew 14. In the background of this, Jesus just fed 5,000 folks. You remember that story? Five loaves and 2 fish, and it fed 5,000 people, and they picked up 12 basketfuls of leftovers. You thought your leftovers were a lot yesterday. They had a lot of leftovers of bread and fish. Well, Jesus decided he needed to go up after all of that, I don't know how you are when I get in a holiday environment. I mean, I love my family, and I love other people. But, after a while, there's a little overstimulation going on, and the noise is it just makes me a nervous wreck. And so I have to go outside somewhere, decompress for just a minute. That's where Jesus was. Jesus needed to go up in the mountain and decompress. He'd been with all these people all day long, clamoring after him, wanting to be with him. And he sent his disciples on ahead of him. Said, go get in the boat, go ahead and go across the sea. Well, you know the story. In the night, they were still fighting with the boat, trying to get across the sea, and Jesus decided he's going to go out there and meet them. Now let's look at verses 25 to 27 of Matthew 14. And in the 4th watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." I just think it's cool that Jesus was always telling his disciples not to be afraid. In other words, be assured. Have assurance. It's okay. You don't have to worry. And to Peter's credit in this story, you know how the rest of the story goes. He showed some pretty great faith, right? I mean, look at verse 28. Peter answered him, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. In verse 29, he said, come. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. I'm going to tell you, I'm not sure that I would have done that. I'm not sure that I would have gotten out of a perfectly good boat to walk on stuff that I had never been able to walk on before. My career was a fisherman. Been on the water my whole life. I know if you step in the water, you go down. You sink. And you don't float. And you don't walk. Not without considerable effort do you even float. And there he goes. He steps out. And he did. Now, we beat Peter up a lot because of his floundering faith. And he had floundering faith in this particular moment. And his faith failed. Look at verse 30. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Peter had a great start, but a poor finish. You know anybody else like that? Does that describe you? In your faith, do you often have a great start but a poor finish? I mean, do you have days where the anxiety gets a little more than you can bear? And you're thinking, Lord, you know what? I trust you, Lord, but this has really got me worried. This has really got me down. You begin to feel like your faith is small. You begin to feel like your faith is weak. Maybe it's a moment when you're sick, or maybe a loved one is sick. And there's been a lot of that going around. Or maybe a loved one died. And you're like, Lord, I know you're there. I know you hear me. I know that you said you're going to always be with me, and I don't have to be afraid. I know you said it's okay to step out of the boat, but I am terrified in this moment. Maybe you feel like your faith is just super weak. How in the world could Jesus want you? When you have faith that weak, I want you to notice the response of Jesus to Peter. When Peter failed Jesus, when he had a great start but a poor finish, notice how he responded to Peter. Verse 31, Jesus immediately reached out his hand, took hold of him, saying to him, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Here's what I want you to see. Jesus immediately reached out his hand to make sure Peter was okay. If that had been me talking to one of my kids or talking to one of you and you're having this problem, I'd be like, what are you afraid of? Why are you doubting? Don't you remember the stories? Let me tell you about Jesus. Here, book, chapter, and verse. Here's why you have to have faith. This is why you have to get up and go. You don't have to be sinking. It's a choice you made. You're just choosing to be weak. We sometimes fuss at people when their faith is not strong. Jesus doesn't do that. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and grabbed Peter to reassure him, you are not going to sink. You are not going down. I am here with you. Jesus immediately reached out his hand before he ever corrected the lack of faith. People need to be assured. People need to be rescued. People need to be held up before they are rebuked. And Jesus rescued Peter. And he continued working with Peter. He continued training Peter. He continued loving Peter. He continued bearing with Peter in all of his frailty and failures for the rest of his life. Jesus had fully committed himself to Peter when he said, from now on, you'll be fishers of men. And to all of us who have committed ourselves to Jesus Christ, he says, him who comes to me, I will not cast out. That's John chapter 6, verse 37. That is a promise. When you said, I'm coming to you, Jesus, he said, you'll never get cast out. I will not let you get cast out. I will immediately hold you up. And that's a promise you can take to the bank. And so when you have a good start but a poor finish, I want you to remember Jesus' words so you can be assured everything's going to be okay with you as well. I want you to know Jesus is your from now on friend. And your faith may flounder, and you may stumble and fall and often crumble. But Jesus didn't say you had to have big faith. Jesus said you can have faith as tiny as a mustard seed. It can be just tiny. I can work with that. He is your from now on friend. Second event in the life of Peter, I call faulty understanding. That's over in Matthew 16. If you're still in Matthew, we'll continue looking at Peter's life. Bless his heart. Faulty understanding. Peter had just made, in the context of Matthew 16, he just made that famous confession. You know the one. Remember, Jesus said, who do men say the Son of Man is? And they said, well, some say Elijah, some say John the Baptist, some say one of the prophets. Jesus said, who do you say that I am? And Peter jumped up and said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus looks at him and said, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah. Flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but only God in heaven has. And on this rock, and he called him Peter, and Peter means rock. And he said, upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. This was a high day for Peter. I mean, he got the answer right. He's the guy that raised his hand and answered the question right. And the teacher praised him in front of all the class. He got all the stars. He got called the rock. It was a good day. Now notice what happens in verse 21. Matthew 16. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you. Verse 23. But he turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You're a hindrance to me. You're not setting your mind on things of God, but things of men. What? What we learn very quickly is that Peter didn't really understand what he was confessing when he confessed that Jesus was the Son of God. And Jesus rebuked him with probably the harshest rebuke to ever fall from the lips of Jesus Christ. Called him Satan. And the reason he was upset about that is because having this faulty understanding of what the purpose of the Messiah was in the first place is a serious problem to Christ. His time on earth is almost over. He's been working with these guys for 3 years, and they still don't get it. They still don't know what it is his purpose was, what his point was. He's going to entrust them with his mission, and they don't even understand the mission. And so Jesus had to get Peter's attention. In Mark's account, in Mark chapter 8, it indicates that Jesus did this where the other disciples could hear. I mean, he didn't even pull him aside. It was in front of the whole class. Get behind me, Satan. You don't understand what you're talking about. And I would be like super confused. I mean, wait a minute, Lord, this is the rock guy. And now he's called Satan? We don't understand that either. They all needed to understand the mission. Don't you know Peter was embarrassed? Don't you know he wished he could just melt into the earth at that moment? You'd think Jesus would put him on probation now. You know what? I'm pulling back the rock thing. You're going to have to earn rock from going forward. You're not going to be the rock until you prove otherwise, because you obviously don't have the sense God gave a goose. You don't understand what the main point is. I've been teaching you for 3 years. What in the world is wrong with you? I mean, that's how I would react. That's how we react to our children. That's how we react to one another. Sometimes that's how we react with our spouse. You ever do that to your spouse? Where's that pot? If I've told you once, I've told you 3 times, the pot goes in this cabinet. And we put it in this cabinet so next time I need the pot, we can find the cabinet. Why can't you understand that? Am I right? You would think that this is the way Jesus would be talking to Peter. It might even drive a wedge in their relationship. But here's what's super cool about this whole event, is it didn't. I want you to fast forward to chapter 17, verse 1. And after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter. Who? Peter. Who? Rockman. Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John his brother, and led them up to a high mountain by themselves. And the rest of that story is the Mount of Transfiguration, where Moses and Elijah come back from the dead, and they're standing there with Jesus, and he's changed, and they're witnessing this glory of God and all of this amazing stuff that's going on. And Peter was one of the guys that got to see all this. The one who didn't have enough sense, God gave a goose. Jesus took him with him. With the faulty understanding and everything, to see a sight no one had ever seen or would see again. Nothing had changed in the relationship between Jesus and Peter. Folks, listen to me. That's exactly the way it is between you and Jesus. That's the way it is between Jesus and me. That's the way Jesus treats us today. When we need to be rebuked because we don't understand something about the mission or our involvement with the mission or what the purpose of the church is or why it is we assemble on Sundays or some other aspect of Christianity that we have a misconception about, he may rebuke us through his word. He may rebuke us through conviction that we get from reading his word or listening to preaching. He may throw up a roadblock that keeps you from doing something because your understanding of what you're supposed to do was messed up. But after the rebuke, everything is going to be just as it was before. It does not affect your relationship. Just because you don't understand every little jot and tittle and whim and wafer of the word, of his mission, doesn't make you any less of his disciple. And he still loves you, and he still wants to guide you, and he still wants to work with you. He's not going to hold a grudge. He's not going to have hard feelings. He's not going to belittle you. He's not going to say you're second class. He's not going to keep reminding you of your ignorance. Faulty understanding does not hurt your standing as a disciple of Jesus Christ. That makes me feel really good. Because I got to tell you, there are so many of us that don't understand the word. And churches divide, and churches split, and denominations are born, and they go 15 different directions. And we're all looking at the word, and we're thinking, how in the world can we all be right? How in the world can we not all be in the same church? Why do we have all these different flavors? Because we got faulty understanding. And folks, as smart as you and I are in the Word of God, there's some of it we don't understand either. And it's not going to keep you out of heaven. We need to let Jesus Christ be Lord of Lords and King of Kings. And all the understanding you can get and glean and gain, go for it. But just because you're missing it on one point or another doesn't mean you're any less of a disciple of Jesus Christ. It just means you're growing. It just means you're still trying. You've got room to improve. We need to give other people that same latitude. Let them grow. Let them grow. There's a third occasion in the life of Peter that I call this one the flimsy commitment. And this is probably the one that I can relate the greatest to. You know, it's in Luke 22 is where we're going to be. Luke 22, starting about verse, well, we'll look at parts of that whole chapter, I guess. But here we are on the night before Jesus' trial. And Jesus tells Peter that he would fall away. You're going to fall away, Peter. Well, hold on a minute, Lord. You just told me a couple of weeks ago I was the rock. And now I'm going to fall away. Yeah, just like a rock off a mountain. And Peter basically said, there is no chance I'm going to fall away. Luke 22, verse 34. Jesus said, I tell you, Peter, the rooster will not crow this day until you deny 3 times that you know me. Mark's account records this. Peter's reply, if I must die with you, I will not deny you. That's Mark 14:31. And in Matthew's account, he adds, Peter saying, even if the rest of these guys fall away, I won't. You can't count on them. You can count on me, Matthew 26:33. That's a pretty bold commitment, isn't it? Isn't that a pretty bold statement? Now let's read the rest of the story in Luke 22, starting about verse 54. Then they seized him, meaning Jesus, and led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house. And Peter was following at a distance. And when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat down among them. Then a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the light, looking closely at him, said, this man also was with him. But he denied it, saying, woman, I do not know what you mean. A little later, someone else saw him and said, you also are one of them. But Peter said, man, I'm not. And after an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, saying, certainly, this man was also with him, for he too is a Galilean. And Peter said, man, I do not know what you're talking about. And immediately, while Peter was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the saying of the Lord, how he had said to him, before the rooster crows today, you'll deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. Failure of failures. Because of flimsy commitment. Here's the guy that's going to die with him. Here's the guy that no matter what anybody else does, I am not turning my back on you. Here's a guy whose commitment went down the toilet in the blink of an eye at the sound of a rooster. How often do we say, I'll never? Lord, I'll never do that. Lord, I'll never turn my back on you. Lord, I don't care what all these other people do. I'll never do that. I'll never be like him. I'll never be like her. I'll never get addicted to drugs. I'll never become an alcoholic. I'll never have an affair on my spouse. I'll never have a fornicative relationship with someone to whom I'm not married. I'll never look at pornography. Lord, I'll never gossip. Lord, I will never forsake you. I will never turn my back on you. You ever say that? You ever think that? I'll never. We can make some pretty strong boasts at times because of, in that moment, we're genuinely committed. We've heard a stirring sermon, or we're coming off of a previous failure, and so we're like, this is it. I'm really committed this time. I'm really not going to do it. I'm not going to lose my temper. I'm not going to get involved in anger. I'm not going to lash out at people. I'm not going to be rude. I'm going to love. I've got it down this time, Lord. I'm never, ever going to mess up again. And then we do. Because the words are barely slipped out of our lips, we can hear the rooster crow and we realize we've just done what we said we'd never do. And it crushes our spirit. And it disappoints Jesus. And we're disappointed in ourselves. And there seems to be nothing we can do except what Peter did and just weep. Just weep bitterly. How could God ever forgive us? How could he forgive Peter? So let's pick up the story 3 days later. So the tomb is now empty. The women came and brought the spices. Jesus is raised from the dead. Praise God for that. And the angel was there in Mark 16, verse 7, and said, he's risen. Why do you seek the living among the dead? He's not here. Go tell the disciples, the text says in Mark 16, 7, go tell the disciples and Peter that he's going before you to Galilee. Why did he single Peter out? Go tell the disciples, and wasn't Peter a disciple? Why did he need his name singled out from the angel? Go tell the disciples and Peter. I believe Jesus wanted to reassure Peter. He still wanted him no matter how flimsy his commitment, no matter how many times you failed. You're still mine, and I'm calling you by name, and your name is still Rock. It reminds me of Lamentations 3, 22, 24. Steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I hope in him. Peter needed that. You and I need that. Because, folks, it matters no matter how many times we fail or fall, God still wants us. Of that, you can be sure. You can be sure. You know, there is one promise you can count on no matter what. And that is, if you are beholding the glory of the Lord with unveiled face, you are reassured and assured of his favor during all the ups, all the downs of your transformation into his likeness. That's 2 Corinthians 3:18. I want y'all to memorize that. And we all with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being changed into his likeness from one degree of glory to another, little at a time. Be patient with the process. And as Jesus treated Peter, as we have seen in Matthew and Mark and Luke, so he also treats us today when we mess up. And we will mess up. And folks, that's the best news in the world. And when the angels came and announced the birth of Jesus, that here's good news of a great joy that's going to be to all the people, this is the news. No matter how much you mess up, when you're a disciple of Jesus Christ, he holds you close. Not just when you're good, not just when you're someone he's proud of, but even in your lowest moments, he still wants you and he still holds you. And that's where we find failure assurance. And that's the beauty of the text of Hebrews chapter 10. The writer of Hebrews in verse 35 to 39 of chapter 10 gives us a reflection of his confidence and the confidence we should have because of this assurance that we've learned through Peter's life. Therefore, do not throw away your confidence, which has great reward. For you have need of endurance, so that you, when you have done the will of God, may receive what is promised. For yet a little while, and the coming one will come and will not delay. But my righteous one shall live by faith. And if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who have faith and preserve their souls. I love the confidence that we can have because of our faith in Jesus Christ. And it's because of that assurance I can face tomorrow and the next day and every failure the day after. The morning after doesn't have to be something we dread. It can be something we anticipate and look forward to because we've been given great assurance. When I was a young man, I sang in a traveling chorus, and I went to Great Lakes Christian High School in Ontario, Canada. We would travel around on the bus to various churches in Canada, but also in the northern United States. We spent time in Ohio and New York, or a couple of places I remember specifically. One of the songs that we always sing, and it's just one of my favorite songs, is My God and I. And I don't even know if it's in our songbook. It may be. And we would sing it a unique way. The first verse would be sung by sopranos, and all the other parts would hum their part. Second verse was sung by altos, and all the other parts would hum their parts. The third verse was sung by the basses and singing the bass part, and I was one of those basses that got to sing out on that particular verse. And then when those three verses ended, everybody would be humming the song again, and we would recite some beautiful poetry in that moment. And I got to be the guy that did that. And it's a beautiful thought. And it goes like this. The stars shine on the earth. The stars look down on me. The stars look up to God, and the stars look down on me. The stars will shine for 1,000,000 years, for 1,000,000 years and a day. But my God and I will live and love when the stars have passed away. Isn't that a beautiful, confident expression of faith? The only way we can have that is when we know we have assurance even in our moments of failure. So today, do you have that kind of confidence? Do you feel that confidence in your spiritual walk? Would you like to? All you have to do is give yourself to it. All you have to do is just step out of the boat, just for a second. Doesn't matter if you fall on your face. Does not matter if you start to drown. Just go ahead and step out. And Jesus will be there to hold you, to help you, to love you, to teach you to be the disciple He wants you to be. If you've never given your life to Jesus, do it today. You can step out of the boat and be baptized for forgiveness of your sins, raised to walk a new person. Everything from this morning into the past of yesteryear is gone. You're not guilty anymore. Everything from today forward, He will hold you and help you no matter when you fail. So that's the invitation. Would you let that be part of your life? Would you come to Jesus today while we stand together and sing this song?